Oh, hello everyone. My name's Donna Herdsman. I'm the Managing Director and Head of Diversity, Equity and Inclusion for Europe, Middle East and Africa at Talking Talent. And the first thing I would say when it comes to Black History Month is that, being Black is actually important to me because it's part of who I am. And, I'm Black and have been Black every single day of my life. I think the difference in relation to Black History Month is that it gives everyone permission who wishes to do so to celebrate both our history and our achievements today without, I think, the risk of overt retaliation or comment. Because it's really important that people work and want to fit into the environment within which they live, but they also want to be able to celebrate their heritage and the heritage of their parents. And sometimes that can feel quite difficult where you are a minority in a country where one of the measurements as to whether or not you belong is the extent to which you talk about the country you live in as opposed to your identity and the things that make you who you truly are. And I think Black History Month gives us a fantastic opportunity to celebrate, but also to remind ourselves of all the things that people have done and contributed to the world that makes the world the place it is today, but also reminds us that when we pull together as a society, then we can achieve anything. For me, the acknowledgement of Black History Month is less an acknowledgement of the month itself. It's more of an acknowledgement of the contribution that Black people have made to society. It's also an opportunity to remind ourselves of the ability of man to be cruel as in, not treating each other as equal, and the right of different elements in society to think that they can control other people and manage and engage with them in a way that's relatively and is very cruel, simply because of the difference of the colour of somebody's skin. So Black History Month, I think, is a good opportunity for us never to forget the cruelty that's gone before. And I know there's still lots of cruelty going on in the world, but to never let us forget and to always remind us that we need to avoid the pitfalls that took us, for instance, into slavery being a prevalent part of society, so that we will never ever go there again. It's quite interesting, the question, the question you ask is, what have I faced in my career? But actually, when I think about the challenges that have arisen, they started before my formal career. So when I was 13 and I was put into the top set at school. So I started secondary school, but I'd been in the second set, and I came back from summer break and I was in the top set, and my form teacher, said to me, because I couldn't work out why I was going to be in different classes from my friends that I made in year one. My form teacher said to me that there must have been a mistake made about putting me in the top set because I was Black, and Black people weren't capable of being bright enough to be in the top set. So I think the challenges actually started way before I even got into the part of my life where I was focusing on a career. And of course that kind of experience stays with you, and you learn to have to push through those and not let those kind of comments be the things that can define your life, where the definition is you feel you're not good enough, therefore you don't step forward, therefore you're not going to give of your best. But the worst, I think, is when you have to live with comments like that. It creates a lack of trust, and because your fear is that other people are going to feel exactly the same, and therefore you don't want to trust anybody, and therefore you don't want to show your true self. And clearly I look back at that experience through the eyes, through adult eyes, but I was a child at the time. And when I look more at my career, there have been comments, and you could say probably microaggressions, and those are probably the hardest ones to live with, where people say things like, just explain to me, how did you get this job? well, you went through the same process that anybody else does to get a job. You were interviewed, as obviously, potentially several times, demonstrated your capability, and people saw your potential. But there's sometimes this undercurrent that people want you to justify, or they feel they have the right to ask you to justify how, as somebody from a minority, has been able to secure the role that they have secured. And and there have been times, for instance, where people have actually said to me, I do wonder if you've really got what it takes to perform, and I'll be watching you. So even before I've been given an opportunity, there's kind of setting an expectation where the reality is that for me to demonstrate I'm just as good as the next person, I probably will have to work twice as hard, achieve 3 times as much, just to be seen as being comparable to my colleagues, the majority of whom would have been white. And I think it's those kind of challenges actually that are much harder for you to learn to live with, and therefore resilience becomes the byword of success. So to be really successful, you need to be resilient. But having said that, I know that without fantastic mentors and fantastic sponsors, I wouldn't have been able to achieve half the things that I've achieved in my career. And we use the word allyship now. It wasn't created kind of when I was right at the beginning of my career, but allies have been really important in helping me navigate the complexities of corporate and working environment. So I think the thing I would say is, don't paint everybody with the same brush, because that's because questions tend to be black or white. Don't paint everybody with the same brush, and look for your allies, and look for for people that see you for who you are and can see the contribution and the abilities you have, and really want to give you the best opportunity to shine. And that's a great question. Who do I look to for inspiration? First of all, I should say, for me, I take inspiration from lots of different people, because just like when you think about who you might want to mentor you or who you want to be, you tend to see people that have a particular strength or trait that you want to be able to embody and reflect, and that's not limited to race. I just want to make that point. But when I was growing up, I had Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" on my wall, and so he has always been a material influencer for me. And in particular, when times have felt really, really hard and difficult, and I've questioned why I've chosen the career path I've chosen, because at times it's felt quite lonely, I can go back to his "I Have a Dream" in particular. And of course, Nelson Mandela is somebody that I still quote, because I always found his ability to really kind of come out with a vision to unite South Africa as a strength that I've seen very few leaders have, because the natural assumption was that he would seek retribution for all that had gone before. And I had the opportunity to work in South Africa, which gave me a greater understanding of the privilege, and it is a privilege, the opportunities I have here in, being someone that lives in the UK. So I would say, if there's something you want to do, just go for it, because there are countries in this world, or economies in this world, where going for it is truly not an option. It's truly not an option. And so Nelson Mandela is a huge, it's a huge influencer. And I've got to say Michelle Obama. I really love both the Obamas actually, but Michelle in particular. I have found her outlook on life to be extremely inspirational, especially her, her statement that when somebody goes low, you go higher. It's a mantra I have constantly within me. And then, you've got more influences close to home, so I wouldn't be where I am without my parents, who came to the UK from Jamaica, and my 2 sisters they might not have all understood what I wanted to do, but always have completely supported me, and so has my husband. So I know I've got a circle around me who support me, and when I think I can't stand up, they're there to hold me up until I can stand up strong again, and they're by my side to celebrate all the good things and to commiserate when things don't go as well as I would have wished. The issue about diversity and whether or not there is enough is a challenge, I think, for every single sector, not just public sector and finance and accounting. I mean, first of all, you can have diversity of thought and diversity of lived experiences. I think you have to go one further, which is, do you have diversity when it comes to people from different heritages and different backgrounds? And that is often something that people don't want to spend enough time exploring. And have you got visible diversity? And I say that because I think we have to avoid the assumption that, to have diversity, you can spot when someone, is from a different heritage, because, a lot of the time you can't. For instance, I had a client, in a local authority client actually, and the director of social services, when she told me that her father was Jamaican, and she was mixed race, but when she told me her father was Jamaican, I nearly fell off my chair, because I would never have guessed that. So, I've learned a lesson that not to assume that you can tell diversity simply by looking at people. But I do think the challenge, for every sector is when you look at people that fill the senior roles, how many of them look like, so for me as a black person, how many of them look like me? And there aren't many. And when you don't see people that look like you, your assumption, and it may be wrong, but that is your assumption. Your assumption is that either that organisation or that sector really doesn't encourage the development and growth of non-white people. And even if I did join that sector, it might be so hard for me to even, aim to achieve those pinnacle roles that I'm better off not trying. So one of the sayings is, can you be who you can't see? And I think it's easier to dream. I think you can achieve your dreams when you can see people that look like you. So there's more work to be done, and I think more work to expand and explain why public sector in particular is so important to society. And I don't think we do enough of that now. When I started my CIPFA qualifications, one of the reasons I did CIPFA was I was fascinated by the public sector. I was fascinated by a sector whose role was to provide services that everyone could use and that was important to everyone's survival. So a great example of that is the NHS. And I don't think we talk enough or we acknowledge enough the importance that the public sector plays in all of our lives. And people tend to talk about the waste rather than talk about how the monies or investment have been used, to keep us living, to keep the streets clean, to deal with environmental issues. So there's that not being shy to talk about the positives, and make sure there's more of a balance between the positives and negatives, and why there's a place in public sector for everyone and anyone, no matter to what their background is. Yeah, that's a great question. How's my experience been? So let me kind of talk about the positives, and then let me talk about the challenges. So one of the things when I think about my CIPFA career, first of all, the fact that I was able to secure a contract. So I did my training at London Lambeth, and was able to then move, become a professional, has provided a platform for all the things I then went on to do, moving from public sector to work in the private sector, but work in the public sector, and then do more public sector work. So it's been a fantastic foundation. And I think it's because, for me, CIPFA was more than just looking at finance. It also introduced me to the importance of prioritisation. I can still remember my exam paper today, you're the deputy CEO of a local authority, and you're having to prioritise your day, and you're presented with lots of different scenarios, and you're time limited. So it really introduced me to this issue of management and leadership, as well as the importance of finance, but also strategy. So in the second year of my CIPFA qualification, one of our big debates was whether or not the poll tax, for those that can remember, whether the poll tax was being discussed, whether or not the introduction of the poll tax would unify or in fact cause division within society. And so we had a huge debate on that. And so, the ability to look at strategy, debate the pros and cons. So what CIPFA really helped me do was to see, the importance of moving from strategy to be able to implement your strategy, including what kind of operations you need to put in place to make things deliverable in a systematic way. And I learned all of that with CIPFA. CIPFA also gave me the opportunity to give back. So I'm proud to say I was an examiner, and as part of it, being an examiner, I would sit the papers in advance, because we really wanted to set papers that were capable of being passed by the students. And I would go to colleges and talk about what we looked for as examiners, and how the marking worked, and the whole process, so people knew the amount of time and care we went into setting the exams. And I got all of that beauty from CIPFA. It helped me to network, so I met other examiners that I probably wouldn't have met. So it gave me the ability to build relationships, network with others. And one of the things that CIPFA gave me was the ability to say it's okay to say I'm good at what I do. So, when I was approached to become an examiner, the first thing I said was no, because I couldn't understand why somebody would want me to be an examiner. And Roger Blackstaff, he's dead now, but it was Roger that asked me to be an examiner. And when I joined the team, he sat me down and he explained why he thought I'd be a great examiner. And, I'm tearing up now, because it was so emotional. It was emotional, and it's emotional now. And to know that, you have people that see you and believe in you is completely and utterly priceless. And, so I've got those really strong memories. And I worked at CIPFA for a year. So CIPFA introduced me to consulting. I worked at CIPFA for a year, supporting the audit committee, and we did great things. We introduced a new award program. We commissioned an award from St. Martin's. We ran a competition. So I had a great experiences. So they kind of as you can see, lots of upsides. I think more of the challenge came from this continued need by many for me to justify how I managed to get my qualification first time. Somebody actually asked me, how did I manage to pass first time? Even now, I don't know why anybody would doubt that I had the capability to pass first time. And it turned out, that question was coming from a place of racism, because there'd been some white colleagues who hadn't passed first time. So there were white colleagues that hadn't passed first time. So wanting to know how I, as a black girl at the time, I saw myself as a girl, even though I was like over 20, how did I manage to pass first time? And so no acknowledgement really that, that like many people that commit themselves to, sitting exams and wanting to pass exams, it's because through sheer hard work, because I was working, studying and having to get ready for exams. So I think that was a bit of a downside. And also trying to see if there is, when, I talked about, can you be who you can't see? And I couldn't see how I could ever become a director of finance in any single organisation in the public sector. Because at the time there were no black directors of finance. I don't know if there are any today. And I just thought, how can I become a black director of finance? And the only route at the time seemed to be, if you wanted to get to a senior role in local government, I didn't even bother looking at central government. If you wanted to get to a senior role in local government, then you had to become a member, which was a million miles away from, why I joined Sitford in the first place. So it's not been without its challenges, and of course you're always in the minority. And I would say to people, I've got this saying, I got it from my mum. If you are in the room, so forget whether or not you're a minority, if you are in the room, it's because you've earned the right to be there. You've earned the right to be there. But clearly, during my career, some of these things you couldn't really talk about, or you couldn't really air, because of the challenge that would come back to you, where it felt like, you were being ungrateful for the opportunity that you were being given, that if you were finding things hard, it was your fault, and you were the one that needs to get your act together. So I'm glad to say I think things are much better now than they were. I'm giving my age away, nearly 40 years ago now, when I started on my formal career path. So things are much better now, but is there more work to be done? Absolutely. So, I would probably have separate the questions if I can, because one's specific about Black History Month, but I think the second question is about life, not just about Black History Month. So let me deal with the Black History Month question first. I think it's really nice if organisations could just, acknowledge it. So some organisations don't even acknowledge Black History Month, don't ask their colleagues or prepare anything or have a session where they talk about, pick a topic and talk about Black History Month. Absolutely nothing at all. And so for those employees, the only way to celebrate Black History Month is to go to events held by other people, meet up with other organisations, but not celebrate it within the organisation to which they belong. And I mention the word belong because clearly if Black History Month is important to you, because it's not important to everyone, but if it is important to you and you are in a workplace that chooses to ignore it, then it affects the extent to which you are somewhere where you can truly belong, because they're not acknowledging or not prepared to shine a light on something that is important to you and is part of who you are. It's part of who you are. So I do think it affects people's sense of belonging, and I would urge organisations, just as a lot of them take the opportunity in particular to celebrate things like Pride, please take the effort, the same kind of effort, to prepare for and celebrate Black History Month. When it comes to the second part, which is, I think, more around what you can do to support people, I would say if an organisation really wants to support their Black employees during Black History Month, that's just not good enough. So if you really want to support your people to grow and develop, and I know some of this is generalisations, but look around your organisation, look at the data you have, and then work out if equity is prevailing in your organisation. What I mean by equity is that everybody has the same opportunity as others to progress and grow. And you can see that in the data. And also equity equates to pay. So let's not forget there's also, the potential pay gap. So you have the data, look at the data, and then try to understand what that data is telling you. And if the data is highlighting the fact that, your employees in the minority, so not just ethnic, but women, people with a disability, people that are LGBTQ+, so anyone that's not the majority norm in your organisation, if they look like they are not progressing as well as the majority, then there is a need to really look at how you're implementing your policies and your processes, and be conscious that bias, because everybody has bias, but be conscious that bias may be playing a part in how your people are progressing or being given the opportunity to progress and to really grow and develop. because I don't know anybody that kind of goes to work to be mediocre. Everybody I know goes to work because they want to give their best, and every organisation I know employs people because they think that their people are really, really rather special. So take the time to create the space where all your people can fulfil themselves, can grow. And when you do that, then what you get back, as well as a sense of belonging, is greater innovation, greater attitude and discussion when it comes to new products, understanding your wider customer base, the ability to identify risks and come up with mitigating strategies, and above all to pivot when things around you are changing. You need to pivot so that you can survive and grow. I mean, I think it's down to everybody to be, you have to be true to yourself. You have to be true to yourself. And one of the reasons, when I think about my career, people go, Donna, when you think about your career, I kind of go, I think my career's had 4 distinctive areas. I started off as an accountant and as an auditor, and I'm still an accountant. Then I became a consultant, and I became a consultant who worked on IT projects. So IT became a big part of what I did, and then I'm in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the thread through all of those roles in my life has been my commitment to diversity, and my commitment to trying to find out who I am and stepping forward as me. But I have to say it's a journey that I've been on. I also have to say that there were times in my career I think I was really angry, so I apologise to anybody that had to live with me through those times when I was angry, because I could see that really being good at what I did just by itself wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to be recognised. I actually had someone point out to me that even though they thought I was really good, there was somebody that they liked better. So it didn't have anything to do with my capability skills. They liked better, and therefore they were going to make sure that there was no way I ended up in a higher grade than this person. And they actually said that to me without blinking. And so I think we have to push through all of these experiences. We have to learn to own our voices and our narrative, and to tell our stories, because if we don't tell our stories, then other people will tell them. And I think storytelling is important, because then it demonstrates that no matter what challenges you are sharing, you are facing in your career, others have faced them too, and they have found a way to push through, and they've found a way to carry on. But when you speak up, you also give the world an inclination of what you've had to go through, and you hope therefore that people will ensure that those following behind you don't have to face the same kind of challenges. There'll be new challenges, but they don't need to be exactly the same. So I really think it's down to you what you want to do and how you want to do it, because one of the lessons I've learned most recently, or acknowledged, I think, because I've always known it, but acknowledged it more predominantly because of the pandemic, it's actually charity starts at home. So it's great to speak up, it's great to advocate for the importance of inclusion and diversity, but it's also important that you take you'll keep an eye out on for those you love and your own your own circle. And I think what you can do personally is down to you, and feel fine about it. And I think what you can do within organisations, again, is you can look, and I'm really into the power of executive resource groups, employee resource groups. And I like employee resource groups because, in the DI space, we say, find your voice, speak up. But sometimes that's really hard, not just if you're an introvert, but if, you have been able to be successful because you've learned not to use your voice. Just thinking you can change that behaviour overnight is almost impossible. And also, if you're a lone voice, you may not have the kind of impact and influence that you would like. So being part of an employee resource group, I think, is a great way of highlighting how you collectively feel, but also the actions that organisations can take to create and maintain and sustain a culture of inclusivity, and the benefits that will arise if they do that. What would I say to my 10-year-old self? I was trying to remember what I was doing when I was 10. I won't lie to you. And as a 10-year-old, and I didn't even realise how competitive I was. I was one of the top marble players at school. And that's how I used to spend my breaks, playing marbles, trying to win as many marbles as I could, and the ones that were really coloured, because they were worth far more than the clear ones. So that's what I was doing, it's 10-year-old, and I loved school. I absolutely loved school. But what I will tell myself as a 10-year-old is that to truly grow, it's okay to be curious about life, and not to let others tell you that it's wrong for you to ask questions. So I used to ask loads of questions because I was fascinated. But I remember there weren't very many black children in my school, but I remember the teacher not wanting me to ask any questions. And I would go, but miss, because I was really, really excited and really, really interested, because I loved school. And I found, I think as a 10-year-old, that my voice became quieter and quieter, because clearly when the teacher called me out, I felt really embarrassed in front of my peers, and thought I was doing something wrong, because you do as a 10-year-old, because teachers have so much power. So that's what I would tell my 10-year-old self. If I've got a question, ask a question. Don't be shy in coming forward, and it's okay to be you. And you don't need to want to have to be with all the popular children in school.